We're talking about literature and film, and we're talking about surprises. So surprises can come in various ways throughout a narrative. They can come in the beginning, the middle, or the end. We're going to talk about all three. You can put surprises in short stories, in novels, in movies. Movies especially are really based on this idea that there's some kind of surprise coming. And I'm going to tell you where they are throughout the story, or at least the paradigmatic ways they happen. I don't know what that big word means, but I know it's relevant. So another word is peripeteia, which just means turnaround, kind of. It means that something surprising happens. And the number one thing to understand about surprises as a literary device, as something you would use in a short story, a novel, or a film, is that it needs to be earned. And that means you can't just put something in because it's cool as a surprise. It needs to be set up as a surprise, and it needs to be something that when it happens, the audience looks back and sees the cause. So if something surprising happens, people can look back and go, "Yeah, I don't buy that one." And then you're in trouble. Or they can look back and they can go, "Wow, I didn't see that one coming." We're going to talk about some examples. We're going to talk about three different kinds. So the first one is what's called the page 30 narrative turnaround. And this means that on page 30 of a screenplay, we're going to talk about it all in terms of screenplay, but it definitely can be translated into the novel. On page 30 of a screenplay, you are supposed to change direction in such a way that you set the real direction for the film, which means in the first 30 pages, you can do misdirects, red herrings. You can be mysterious, like in The Matrix, where you kind of didn't even know why all the surreal was happening. And then on page 30, it's explained to you by Morpheus. And that's not the example I'm using right now, though, but I am telling you that there is kind of a rule. Page 30, of course, doesn't have to be page 30, it can be as early as page 10. I wouldn't make it much later than page 30 because it is the direction the film is really going, and you're supposed to earn some kind of shift where there's a turnaround and people say, wow, this is a movie about two different realities, like in The Matrix. So a good example of this is a Woody Allen movie called Small Time Crooks. I actually love Woody Allen movies. I'm not in the majority here anymore, which is sad, but this movie is about some small time crooks who are trying to rob a bank. And so they buy a property right next to the bank and they pretend to open up a bakery selling cookies. But what they're really doing down in the basement is trying to dig a tunnel into the bank. Stupid idea. Typical Woody Allen. So what happens around page 30, the end of the first act is what it's called. What happens is I think they flood the basement. They hit a water pipe. They can't dig the hole anyway. It's not going to work. And the basement fills up with water. And the bank heist idea is a complete flop. But right around that time, what happens is I think Woody Allen's wife is baking the cookies or has some theory about how to bake cookies. And so the cookies they're putting out as a cover become super popular and everyone wants to buy their cookies. And so that's kind of the direction the movie goes, is the bumbling crooks now trying to sell cookies. That turnaround in after the end of the first act where you think, is this going to be a bank heist? Are they going to succeed with the tunnel? They seem pretty dumb and inept. I would be really surprised if they dug this tunnel, and it all comes true because then you say, oh, this makes more sense. And this leads to number two surprise. Number two surprise is life is naturally surprising. And so you could take that bank heist turned successful bakery peripeteia, and you could, if I'm pronouncing that right, and put that in the middle. And this second surprise is always in the middle because it can be anywhere. And it is that you see life surprising you in a way that's completely earned. You say, yeah, that is super ironic that the dumb cookies you were using as your cover are actually super successful where your bank heist fails because you're inept and the chick cooking the baking the cookies is actually better at doing shit than you. Really turn around for, in this particular case, a comedy. But you're thinking about ways to have surprises happen that make sense in the context of your narrative, that really boost it, that really do a number of things. I've always said that all these devices need to do their job and do multiple things. In this particular case, be authentic, be earned, be surprising, but also play into theme. You always want that to play into theme. That was the big thing. We've talked about that a million times. So the third surprise, the last one, is just the end. It's page 90 in a screenplay. People talk about how you change that segue from the second act to the final act or the third act with some kind of additional turnaround or change or surprise that then takes you into the conclusion. It takes you into, again, work into theme, be super earned. And so an example would be The Usual Suspects, which actually occurs probably on page 119. But Bruce Willis, the movie where he's a ghost, and then in Fight Club, Fight Club's a really good example. Again, a little bit later in that third scene near the conclusion. In The Usual Suspects, of course, we find out who did it. In Fight Club, we find out that it's one person with two personalities. There's a movie called Identity that a lot of people didn't watch with John Cusack, where near the end we find out. I don't want to spoil that movie because a lot of people haven't watched it, but we find out the secret. And so that happens near the end of the third act. But can also at the beginning of a third act and really get the movie going in a certain direction that builds off that surprise and is earned. So again, it matches the surprising elements that we all experience in everyday life. It's authentic. It's universal. People say, wow, that's exactly what happens to me. I try to rob a bank and I end up failing there, but succeeding somewhere else. It's like the Rolling Stones song, you get what you need. And so that was a really stupid example, but I'm telling you these different versions of surprise and where they come. I hope that helps you with your novels and your screenplays. Thanks for admiring me.